Thanks a lot, Jen. I'm Josh Slotnick. I'm one of Missoula County's 3 county commissioners.
And Juan? I'm sorry.
Hi, everyone. Juanita Vero, the second of Missoula County's 3 commissioners.
Sarah?
I'm Sarah Hudson, the Executive Director of Snowy Mountain Development in Lewistown. I serve a 6-county area: Fergus, Petroleum, Musselshell, Golden Valley, Wheatland, and Judith Basin.
Thank you. And Chris?
Good morning, Jen. Actually, we have a little group here together. So Chris Osborne, the Chief Administrative Officer for the county.
Dave Strohmeyer, the 3rd of Missoula County's Commission.
And then we have a citizen joining us today, Larry Chase.
Hi, Larry. I also see we have Mel Fisher, who's Strategic Projects Manager and who was instrumental in pulling a lot of these numbers together. So we really appreciate you all being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Maybe. Come on. The suspense is killing you. I know it is. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay. Representative Oblander, your.
Very good. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking some time of your day for us to go through this whole program with us for the Local Option Property Tax Reduction Act. We're pleased to be able to bring this forward today. Excuse me, my voice has been a little hoarse today, so I apologize if I have to clear my throat. But definitely want to thank those who are joining us by Zoom. Appreciate you being there, as well as the 2 commissioners we have here with us today. Appreciate you taking the time. We think that this is a good option for the taxpayers of Montana, and the opportunity to be able to provide them with an option, if you will, on how they might reduce their property taxes. LOPTRA, as we call it, the acronym, is the result of countless conversations and efforts on many people, those in the room, and many other conversations have taken place basically over the last couple years as we've tried to find solutions to the problem we all know we have, which is property taxes in Montana. There's been stake members from both parties, bipartisan effort, myself and Representative France. Appreciate him participating as well. And this bill clearly reflects the work that's been done by everybody the last couple years. It helps balance the state oversight with local control and allowing localities to craft tax policy that reflects their own local economy and their unique opportunities and challenges that they have. LOPTR allows communities to choose to leverage Montana's robust tourist economy. We have, and you'll probably hear this a few times today, we have approximately 13 million tourists that come through Montana on a yearly basis. And this is an attempt to try and let them help pay for some of our services and the things that we do, just like we do when we travel to other states. LOPTRA also ensures that both homeowners and renters are included. We're looking to give some benefit to all the parties that are involved in this, and ensures that industries affected by the tax can cover their administrative costs. So by now we're all familiar that the problem in Montana, as we hear every day, is high property taxes. We only have so many sources to receive property taxes from. And this is an attempt to try and do some things to help everybody, if you will. Montana's evolving economy, decrease in the number of corporate property taxes, with corporations having mass layoffs, businesses having to either shut down or slow down. That puts a burden on all of the taxpayers, primarily the residents of Montana. So every Montana resident is now covering not only some of the corporate tax because of the loss of the corporate property tax base, but we are looking to involve the tourists. These guests, these tourists spend $5.5 billion a year in our great state. And so we're just gonna ask them to help pitch in and cover some of our services and the things that this state needs. And with that, I will turn some time over to Representative France to go into some further detail, and we'll just go around the room at different points and then be available for questions at the end. So Representative France.
Yeah, well, thank you, Greg, and I just, Greg and I served on the local government interim committee, and we had a number of presentations on the property tax situation. Some would say a crisis, others would say just hard times for property tax owners. And over the course of the interim, we began talking about a bipartisan bill. And I would say there have been plenty of other local option proposals that have come to the Montana legislature over many sessions, but I think this may be the first one that is really a bipartisan bill. And beyond that, it also goes to our local governments, where we have some pretty deep blue counties and some pretty deep red counties and all shades in between, that recognize that their business is providing services and being fair to their property tax owners, and that they need another tool in their toolbox to be able to govern effectively and fairly. So in addition to the legislative partnership, I want to really call out the support we've gotten from some of the groups like MACO, the Montana Association of Counties, and from individual commissioners. And I'd like to just introduce a couple that are here in the room. Joe, would you just introduce yourself and then pass the mic?
Thank you, Representative. I am Commissioner Joe Briggs from Cascade County.
I am Gordon Oakers, Roosevelt County, up on the High Line.
And I just point out that we have red and blue counties, but we also have rural and urban counties. And the challenges we face across the state are different, but they all require a diverse tax base, and trying to get a handle on the 13 million tourists that are coming to Montana has really been a uniting force in seeing that, geez, there's a source of revenue out here that we can tap into that won't cause property taxes to shift to another class, won't involve trying to take money out of one Montanan's pocket to put it in another. This is new revenue. And with that, I just highlight one point, that as we have shaped this tax bill, this law trope, we really have focused on those services that tourists are using. So, our goal has been to not take money out of Montanans' tax pockets, but rather to look to our tourists. So this is on eating and drinking establishments. It's on hotels and cabin rentals. It's on outfitters and guides. It's on non-SNAP groceries that tourists are buying in our stores. It's on rental cars. And yet when we look at the numbers, there's a kind of a startling amount of revenue that comes from even this narrow list of things that counties could tax on if they choose to move a local option to their bill. I just highlight a couple of figures from Cascade County, which Joe can certainly speak to. A 4% assessment there would bring in about $14.5 million. This would produce at the end about a $500 tax credit for both residents of Great Falls and Cascade County. And in our view, this is real money in Montanans' pocketbooks. And the last thing I'd say is that both Greg and I are respectful and supportive of the work that's going on for property tax relief. Representative Jones and Representative Thane, again, by both parties recognize the challenge. I've got bills moving through. We view our bill as not in competition, but providing some more diversity to the solutions that are being offered to Montanans by way of property tax relief. So with that, happy to turn it over to Joe and Gordon if they'd like to say a few words, please.
Could I'm sorry, Representative Kranz, could you just run through like how it's going to play out? What does the bill say? How does it work?
Very simply, the counties would decide they want to write an ordinance for the ballot for their voters. Our bill requires that that a vote be held during the general election. We want to make sure that every voter in Montana or every county that they have a chance to vote and participate in this. There are guardrails that make sure this isn't shifted back to Montanans. Again, those go to the categories that are available for tax purposes. And so, Commissioner Briggs? Greg?
Yes, if I might just interject. We hope everybody understands, and it's probably going to be key to us getting the word out to all of our constituents and all of our taxpayers throughout our counties and throughout the state, is that LOPTRA is an optional event. It's not something that's mandatory. It's not going to be dictated by commissioners or anybody else. It's something that they get the right to vote on. And just want to make sure everybody understands that point. So, Commissioner, sorry.
Thank you very much for making that point. And gentlemen, my thanks to both of you for working on this. It's been an interesting 2 years as we've gone through this. My role this morning is predominantly to talk about the revenue. And as has already been pointed out by the good representatives, the goal set here is to tax the temporary visitors into Montana, not to tax those of us who live and work here. And as you've heard, that's 13 million folks wandering through Montana during the course of a year. And with no sales tax, they are not contributing to the cost of the infrastructure that is necessary to host them. I travel a fair amount, and I can tell you that most places you go, it's expected. So we're not going to run any tourists off by having a sales tax because they're used to it. What's different about this one is how we use the revenue. The revenue from this tax, coupled with some other taxes that already exist, current revenue streams like the taxes on rental cars, hotels, cabins, short-term rentals, all of those funds which are currently being paid by tourists and these new taxes that will be on tourists go specifically and only to property tax relief. There is no new money in this bill for local government or for state government. This is entirely a way that the residents of Montana can vote to let the tourists help pay for the services they're using. So like Tom indicated with the examples in Cascade County, if Cascade County voters were to initiate this and the numbers are in that neighborhood, every taxpayer will see a significant decrease in their property taxes. It's not going to be coming from Montana corporations. It's not going to be coming from any other classes of property. It's going to be coming from our visitors who are utilizing our services. To me, that's critical. Additionally, renters will benefit because any owner of long-term rental property that wants to see the property tax credit must prove to the county that they have set a portion, that a set portion of that is passed on to the renters. So just because you don't own your own home does not exclude you from this bill. A lot of work has gone on to balance this bill to protect the low-income people, to protect the renters, but still provide property tax relief to everybody. Additionally, LOPTRA acknowledges that the industries that will be collecting the tax might see some increased administrative cost, so the bill provides a portion of the proceeds go to cover those costs. So the grocery store that is now having to make changes to their system to basically tie into the SNAP system for all purchases, they will receive a credit back for their costs of making that work. What this is all about is that we're asking the visitors who come here, use our roads, enjoy our beautiful scenery, to help pay for it. They are expecting it, as I mentioned, as I've found as I travel, that's an expectation that that's going to be. Most people, when they come to Montana, are just amazed that we don't have a general sales tax. This is a locally turned on sales tax. And Gordon will address the next important part that was part of what Mako wanted, and these gentlemen were happy to work with us on, is a way to help reduce property taxes in those counties that are not levying the tax themselves. So, Gordon?
Gordon Oakers, Roosevelt County, which is on the High Line up in the northeastern Montana. Some of these smaller communities, smaller counties, if they don't vote in this, will still get a part of the 9%, 9.25% kickback on some of those, so we'll still get a little tax relief. But along the High Line, you have to realize property tax is how counties fund infrastructure, public safety. So there's there still is a demand on our property taxes that if we can get some property tax relief by this voted in by our constituents, it'll help all our property tax owners within these counties. We have on Highway 2, you're going to Glacier. We have a lot of touristers coming on that east-west path. We have a tremendous amount of hunters in our area. They do a dinner for the hunters for pheasant hunting. There's 37 states represented on that dinner. So we have a lot of out-of-state people coming in, using our infrastructure, using our public safety, that this would be a way to capture some of those new dollars.
Thank you, commissioners and representatives. I just wanted to top off with some figures because I know that's also always helpful to put into context for folks at home. In 2023, Montana saw 12.64 million non-resident visitors. 12.5 million visitors, right? The top spends, of course, fuel was the number one, 28%. We already clicked on that. We, in Montana, we used to have a local option fuel tax that's no longer available to local communities, but that is 28% of the out-of-state spend. And the rest of the categories bring in a significant amount of money. If we are able to capture some of those transactions, it includes 57% of the non-resident spend in these very narrow categories. We're not talking about bookstores on Main Street. We're not talking about clothing stores here that are competing with out-of-state e-commerce. We're talking about eating and drinking out, hotels and cabin rentals, outfitters and guides, some groceries that are not covered on SNAP. We're not taxing medicine. We're not taxing pet food. We're not taxing cleaning supplies. And we would be scooping in the assessment that currently exists on hotels, motels, and rental cars. These are some numbers that show what sort of money we're talking about. For example, and we're using the 23 numbers, the sources of the categories came from various places, national restaurant industry, guides and outfitters, self-reported income, Department of Revenue, Tourism Bureau, the various economists' reports. If Cascade County adopted this and laid a 4% assessment on the categories that they were able to, that would mean a 63% reduction in the county portion of your taxes, $505 for a $500,000 home. In Flathead County, it'd mean an 85% reduction to the portion of your county taxes. In Yellowstone County, it would mean a 70% reduction of the portion of your county taxes. In actual dollars and cents, and I have this broken down by 2%, 3%, and 4% tax revenue. If Missoula, Butte, Silverbow, Cascade, Flathead, Gallatin, Lewis and Clark, and Yellowstone counties chose to layer a 2% on all of these categories, that would mean it would raise statewide $75.8 million. 7.5 of that go to rural counties, non-assessed counties. That's real money. 68 million would stay right there in those assessed counties. If they chose the 3%, that would mean 102.4 million stays in those urban counties, and 11.3 million would go to our rural counties. If they chose 4% on these expenditure items that folks are going to spend money on anyway, That means 151.7 million additional dollars collected from our out-of-state residents. Now, please keep in mind that these numbers come from out-of-state spend. This does not include in-state spend, so these numbers are conservative. We all know that Montanans vacation in our backyard. I personally vacation up to the Flathead area every summer, and I try to hit eastern Montana in the spring, so I would be paying this as well. And I should, because I depend on local services to exist when I go visit those communities. I depend on 911 to answer the phone if I get myself in a pickle. I depend on the sheriffs and deputies to help me if I slide into a ditch, or if my son gets lost, I would call them to ask for help. I depend on these local services as a Montana resident when I'm a tourist in my own state. I travel through these rural counties, and therefore they support tourism as well. So absolutely, we should help share some of this wealth. I think this, as a result of all the conversations that started, and credit where credit is due, Commissioner Josh Slotnick in Missoula County sat down and presented this idea, and what we did from then is speak to every single person that hated it the most. And we wanted to know exactly why they hated it. And some of those reasons were very good. These are smart people bringing up very valid concerns, and so we sought to address all of those concerns. And we mitigated that impact. And we brought new people in, and we carved other things out. We really wanted to know what Montana would think, though, and so we polled on it. We polled on it in the winter of 22, and we polled on it in the winter of 24. And we asked Montanans, without educating them at all, if we were to lay a tax, if you got to choose, if you could lay a tax on tourism items, and that money would go to reduce your property taxes, what do you think? Now, I wasn't expecting much because, as we know, sales taxes are not very popular in Montana, right? In 2023, there was a poll that said that 65% Montana doesn't want a general statewide sales tax. So this isn't a surprise. So that was our biggest hurdle that maybe we couldn't surmount. But with these parameters, if we're taxing these very narrow items, if we're taxing the things that tourism spend money on, and if we're funneling the money to property tax relief, we were very pleased to find that 64% of the people out of the gate in 2022 said absolutely yes, we support that. After we told them a little bit more about it, the types of categories that would be assessed, how the property tax relief would be given, that support grew to 70% in 2022. This is a population that was made up of Montana. We have folks above 65 in proportion to the number of people above 65 in this state. We have young people, we've got Democrats, we've got Republicans, urban voters, rural residents, across the board, Republicans, Democrats. This came back at the same number for all of them. They all supported at 70% after the education. The only number that didn't change was the strongly opposed, that's 18%. And if you speak to a pollster, they will tell you that there's something else that makes them oppose this, and we don't know what that is. It could be the words tax, it could be they don't like tourists. Whatever it may be, nothing will change their mind. That's 18%, and I acknowledge that. That's fair. We get to disagree in this society. However, 70% supports this idea. Same results came back in 2024. Same. This is what I think Montana is ready for. I'm going to hand it back to Representative Oblander.
Thank you, Jen. That's great information. And I guess as we've gone through this whole process, if you think about the number of residents in Montana, we're at roughly 1.1 million, plus or minus. We're looking to tap into almost 13 million tourists coming through our state to be able to help us as a state better meet our services, help counties, help all of the residents with their property taxes. So this is, like I said, this has been a collaborative effort. It's been a long process. Jen's done a remarkable job, as well as many of those that are on Zoom, and the commissioners have provided their input, which is absolutely critical to being able to have something like this move forward. And we're hoping that the counties will embrace this and be excited about this, because we think this is real change that can help the people of Montana. So with that, we're open to take a few questions if you'd like. Yes.
Let me make sure I understand clearly like how targeted this is, right? So you talk about focusing on tourists, right?
Interruption. I don't recognize everybody here.
Okay, I'm Eric Beecher with Montana Free Press.
What's your name?
Eric Beecher with Montana Free
Okay,
Press.
great,
Sorry.
Eric, thanks. Short answer is Montanans, you know, under the rules of interstate commerce, you can't levy a tax just on non-residents. If it were that simple, we probably would have done that decades ago. Because this is interstate commerce, we need to levy, give local voters the option to impose this tax, but everyone, tourist and non-tourist, would pay it. We do think we have, you know, we've targeted the goods that the tax can be on. Drugs, clothing, the kind of things that everyday Montanans are buying every day are not taxable. It's the kind of services that people use at their discretion, going out for a drink. Sometimes when they're a tourist in Montana, they're going to get a motel room. But, you know, again, we have 13.5 million tourists coming to this state. I just would add this, you know, Representative Oblander talked about how our tax mix has changed. We used to have more heavy industry in this state. There used to be smelters in Great Falls and lumber mills in Missoula, and they're not there anymore. So our industry has changed, and what we've done is built this incredible tourist industry. And if someone said, well, we shouldn't have a business equipment tax on the lumber mills, or we shouldn't have a severance tax on oil and gas, legislators would say that's crazy. But here we have built, over the last 30 years, one of the biggest tourist industries in the state, and we don't give our residents a chance to participate in the revenues that they're bringing here. And again, we feel that the best way forward is not through a statewide tax, but rather to look to the counties, make the decision locally. But at the end of the day, Eric, yes, Montanans will pay part of this tax, but we think we've done it as fairly as we can. And I would also stress the point that several have made. There is provision in our bill to give some of this tax relief to renters. So it's not just the property tax owners that would benefit.
It sounds like that would be contingent on landlords choosing to participate, correct? So not up to landlord.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of local flexibility in this.
I'm Shaylee Rager, Montana Public Radio. We actually just left a press conference with the governor before we came here, and he was focused on property taxes. So he essentially told us, you know, his preferred option is the homestead exemption, 231, and a cap on local government spending. And then we kind of ran through the gamut of all these proposals, including this one with him about, you know, could there be other companion bills to accompany property tax relief. And he said he would consider any bill that comes across his desk, but he said he doesn't want to subsidize local spending with sales tax. He says Montanans don't like sales tax. He wants to kind of keep it to his two top priorities. I'm curious what your response is to his approach to property taxes and where you think there might be some wiggle room for moving this debate along.
Well, I'll give you my opinion. The governor is like all of us. He recognizes the need to do something property tax wise. Our intent with this bill, we hope it'll be complementary to the things the governor wants to do. We all know that historically Montana has not wanted anything to do with the sales tax. I don't like the word myself. That's why this is a local option property tax relief act. And I think that if we can move things forward, anything we can do to benefit the taxpayers in Montana, I think we have an obligation to look at that. And I would hope that what other bills are coming forward with this one, that we as a legislator can look at that whole ball, if you will, that Mod Podge of things, and try and move things forward, because everybody knew coming in that ran this last election cycle, when you knock on doors, anything you do, what are people saying? What can you do about property taxes? lower my property taxes. Why do we have to have them so high? Well, I operate under the pretense that our property taxes in Montana are like a teeter-totter. If you take from one entity, it goes to another one, and there's no way around that. There's only so many ways to create revenue in this state. And we felt like this was an untapped revenue source. And so our goal is to try and do that. And it gives local taxpayers their option. And we hope that they'll embrace that option and say, yes, this is something we want. We saw the numbers of 70% that Jen put up there. That's huge. That's 2 out of 3 are saying, yes, please, let's do something. So I hope that this works together with what else is coming. Representative?
Yeah, I think both Greg and I push back on the narrative that there are a bunch of tax and spend county commissioners out there that take great joy in raising their property taxes and purchasing luxury goods for the county courthouse. I'd like to invite the commissioners, both here in the room and then perhaps the Missoula commissioners, to sort of speak to how they're budgeting and their reality when they're trying to do their local government.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Franz. There certainly is a narrative more in the legislature than out in the general public that somehow local government is out of control. The reality is I've been a commissioner for 21 years, full-time commissioner. I manage the finances of the county as part of my tasking. We have been limited to being able to raise taxes by 1/2 of the average rate of inflation for the prior 3 years. For 28 years, I believe, is when that started. So you're always behind the power curve as far as being able to keep up with inflation. So when you really look at the numbers, the narrative that most counties are spending way too much is not factual. What we spend on has changed because of federal regulations and, quite frankly, because of unfunded mandates coming out of the legislative body every 2 years. They tell us you have to do something else, but by the way, you don't get any money to do it with. But going to the comments that were made in regard to the compatibility with the governor's bill, I view this fully compatible. In my personal opinion, my concerns about the governor's proposals, which I support, are it does not recognize the untapped revenue of the tourists coming through the state. There is nothing in his proposals that addresses that. Everything in his proposals is, there's some property shifting or tax shifting in those proposals. There's some caps. But this bill adds no new spending to local government. This bill takes all of the money that comes from our visitors paying tax, the selected sales tax, and puts it directly against property tax bills. So if this bill passes and the county were to pass it, there would literally become a line item on our tax bill that we send out that shows reduction due to LOPTRA and a dollar amount. So the taxpayers would see that this is a direct benefit back to them. So I do not see this as incompatible. I see this as increasing the pool of who's paying to people who aren't currently paying, while the governor's bill are addressing some inequities and some issues within the existing tax base of those of us who live here.
Yeah, and I agree with Joe there. This will not affect our county budgets whatsoever. We don't add money to our county budgets. 99.75% of the dollars collected will go directly to the property owner's tax reduction within that county.
Jan or Joe?
Just ask if Commissioner Slotnick or Commissioner Vera wants to weigh in on this for a minute.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. First, I just want to say thank you to Representatives Oblander and Franz, and to Jen for bringing this along so far. You guys have done great work. So I wanted to address that question about spending and just add a bit to what Commissioner Briggs said. 2/3 of the money we spend does not come from local property taxes. We've seen in media across the state charts and graphs with spending, county spending going up. Taxation and spending are not the same thing. And as Commissioner Briggs said, we're limited to an increase at 1/2 the 3-year average of inflation. It's worth kind of scratching your head on if our taxation goes up at half the 3-year average of inflation, how is it that residential property taxes have increased in some places 20, 30, even 40%? This is because of what you all have mentioned here, the burden shift. The burden has shifted squarely onto the backs of homeowners and renters. And as Representative Oblander described very, very articulately with the teeter-totter, nobody wants that burden shifted somewhere else. One of the great things about this act is it moves that burden outside of our system and onto our tourists who are right now using services but not paying for them. In fact, one of the causes of our increase in having to provide services is that we provide services for folks who don't pay for them. Now, on any given day in Missoula County, we have enough 911 operators to handle the population we actually have. That means guests and locals, not just the locals. Same thing with sheriff's deputies. We maintain our roads to meet the level of use they get, not just from locals, but from locals and our guests. So there you go. Thanks for letting me chime in. I do really want to emphasize the fact that our taxation goes up at half the 3-year average of inflation, and our spending does not, because our spending comes from other sources. Thanks.
Kayla with the.
Just want to add, as a Missoula County Commissioner and also as an owner of one of the oldest family-owned and operated dude ranches in the state of Montana, this act truly is common sense, effective, fair problem solving, and we are so proud of all the work that's gone into this. So thank you so much.
Kayla with the Daily Montanan. I was curious how this would work or wouldn't work with a couple of the places that already have a local option sales tax, and if they then get to just keep their money and could not distribute a portion to other counties.
We'll let Jen tackle that one. Thank you.
It's a great question, Kayla. It's written so the existing resort communities that time after time reauthorize their local resort tax, everything stays the same for them. Our intention is not to disrupt that apple cart. Many of those are bonded out decades into the future. This would layer on top of the existing resort communities. I think that's a great question. Would you please repeat it into the microphone so our Zoom folks can hear it?
Yeah, maybe I can be more articulate. Sorry, maybe I can be more articulate the second time anyway. I'm curious how this proposal, how a local option tax passed under this proposal would intersect with the current 1510-420 tax cap. If a county passes a local option tax, reduces property tax collections accordingly with the offset, would then the county be able to raise taxes faster than half the rate of inflation in subsequent years? And if not, what can you point me to the mechanism in the bill that prevents that from happening?
So Commissioner Slotnick is welcome to weigh in. My short answer is no. It would not allow the counties to make more. This is seen as a credit to the residential homeowner and to owner of a long-term rental who wants to pass some of those savings on to their renters. This is seen as a credit to them. It is not seen as an offset to anything in 1510-420.
Jan, exactly. I was just going to say exactly the same thing. Thank you.
That was an excellent question, and probably the simplest way to look at it is that the revenue that comes in through this would be considered part of the real property taxes that were collected. So it will have no impact on those calculations for the next year that are based upon the 1/2 of the average rate of inflation for 3 years.
And Eric, I'd just add one of the things that has kind of propelled us to move this bill is looking at our resort communities where they were given the authority years ago to go to their voters, enact a local levy on their tourists, but also on their residents. And they've passed those levies every 10 years because they have been so successful and are so broadly supported by their voters. So that tells us that extending really that authority to local governments, we can rely on the voters to decide whether or not it's a good idea. And then, as our bill does, after 10 years, decide, well, that didn't work so well, we're not going to reauthorize it. So we really have been intent on making sure that the voters, the taxpayers, are the primary drivers of this bill.
I would add that this would require a reauthorization as well, because we learned that lesson from the resort communities. And 3 of our co-sponsors come from those successful resort communities, Senator Logie, Representative Cochran, and Senator Fern.
Jonathan Andarian from the Montana Television Network. I was curious, is the mix of services that are taxed under this, is it similar to what the resort tax currently hits, or is it different mix of stuff?
Thanks for the question. Each resort tax is different, as you know. It's my understanding, and I'm not intimately familiar with all of the different resort taxes, it's my understanding that the resort taxes are much broader than this. This is very, very narrow to only these categories. However, if I go visit Red Lodge or Whitefish or Big Sky and I purchase a sweatshirt, I'm going to be paying the assessment on that. So that local business owner is in competition with the local resort tax against, say, an e-commerce site. That's not the case with this. We are assessing things that you're not competing with e-commerce for.
A question that's maybe not directly related to how this bill works, but again, more just kind of about the political conversation around taxes and property taxes this session. On the local government cap, I remember a lot of county commissioners in that hearing coming forward and saying, you know, if we have this cap, we're going to have to start cutting essential services. This is going to impact the way we can fund government. And the governor and also Grover Norquist said that was maybe fear-mongering, that cuts didn't actually have to happen, and that if a county commissioner said they would have to cut, say, law enforcement because of a cap, that was maybe it was time for a new county commissioner, was the governor's quote. So I'm wondering how you might respond to that, and if you have thoughts on why finding a different way to help your residents with property taxes in this form as opposed to a cap, why that makes sense to you.
Well, those are interesting quotes, and I will tell you that every county is in a little different circumstance. There are the general patterns. The general pattern is that we can't keep up with inflation based upon the property taxes. So have cuts had to happen in some counties? Absolutely. The presence of the increase in federal money that has occurred over the same time period has kept many of those cuts from having to be as large or even maybe having had to occur. The ARPA funds and the infrastructure funding and the tribal and local government consistency funds, those are over. So there is no manna from the federal government that's going to come in. So at this point, literally every budget cycle, at least in Cascade County, we are looking at what services we may have to cut and who it's going to impact. And we do very little except what is statutorily required. Some of the things we do that are not statutorily required are things like our aging services program, which is designed to allow our aging population to stay in their homes longer and not have to move to a nursing home, which costs more tax dollars. I would argue that some of those optional things we do saves money in the long run. It's not dissimilar to the Medicare, Medicaid arguments that are going on down here. It's pay me now or pay me later. I'm old enough, I remember the Fram oil commercials. Probably the only person in the room that does. But they're, yeah, Grover would remember. You know, that bill, that limit on us has been in play for a very long time. I'm the first one to say that I suspect it has been very effective at squeezing waste out of county government. but you can't live on a starvation diet forever. It ultimately shows problems, and it shows problems in maintaining the infrastructure. If you look at the use of ARPA funds, you're going to see an awful lot of communities had to use those ARPA funds to catch up on deferred maintenance. That's not the way to run a business, and it's not the way to run a government. So I would argue all day long that that's not fear-mongering. That's being honest. And the circumstances from the federal government kept that from happening, but I don't see that happening again.
Hey, Jen, could I add something to this? Hello?
Please, absolutely.
Jen?
Please, yes, absolutely.
Oh, thanks a lot. And thanks, Commissioner Briggs. I totally agree with everything you said. I appreciate the acknowledgement that the different counties function differently. It is a little bit of a head scratcher if you think, okay, if we can increase our taxation at half the rate of inflation, how are we going to get by if we are out there buying goods and services and paying people at the full rate of inflation? It just doesn't work. And as Commissioner Briggs noted, there was some federal money, and that's helped, and that federal money has dried up mostly. Where we have been able to deal with this in Missoula County is through new growth. We're in a high growth place. We get newly taxable property with regularity. And that sounds like, oh, great solution. It's actually quite complex because the amount of tax revenue that newly taxable property sends to the county doesn't entirely cover the cost of bringing services to those new residents. So even as much as we need new revenue to remain in operation, because half the rate of inflation doesn't actually cover costs, there is an additional cost to growth. We're in kind of a grow or die situation, and growth costs everybody a little bit of property tax money. And we absolutely need to grow because of our housing crisis. So the whole thing is quite a knot, a K-N-O-T knot. It's a vexing situation. This cap has most likely been successful, as Commissioner Briggs noted, in squeezing waste out of the system, but it has not been successful in allowing counties to meet our needs. We've had to grasp at things like federal money, which I have to point out is also tax money, and it leans heavily into growth, which is great, but growth costs money too.
At this point, I'm just, Commissioner, I'm showing the graph of the Missoula County top expenditure categories that indicate dollars that have nothing to do with property tax. So that's why expenditures can grow without property tax growing.
Yeah, 2/3 of our spending.
You know, I really reject the narrative that local governments are wasting taxpayer dollars or engaged in activities that really aren't required by way of government services. I think show me where that's true would be my answer. But I guess I agree with the governor that if that's occurring, I don't expect those county commissioners to be kept in office. And just as the local option tax is a voter choice, who we elect to administer it, who we elect to run our county governments, is what the local voters are in charge of. And I have really yet to see the election where someone has come in charging that, oh, geez, Commissioner Jones is spending way too much money and beating that commissioner. So, again, I think we think our local governments are responsible and responsive to their voters, and this taxes will be responsive to the voters, and that's where the power should lie, and we have faith that that part of our government is working pretty well.
In our area, our property taxes, our property values, our mill values in the last 10 years have been stagnant. We don't have this growth, but we have natural resources. That's helped our budget tremendously. But there again, none of this money that we're talking about here for this local option tax is going to go to any county budget. This is 100% for property tax relief for our citizens. And that's what we're talking about here. We need to stay on the topic of we're trying to reduce property taxes for the state of Montana, and this will do that.
I'll just add a little bit. If you think about the sticker shock that we all got with our property tax statements on the last go-around, and that gets reassessed every 2 years. So we know that there's another assessment coming. We need to try and hit this head on, not try and circumvent the issues that are going on. And this is just an option that we feel good about that really, really, really positively impacts the taxpayers of Montana. So I just think we have to be aware that anything we can do to help them is important. And we feel like this is a very viable option.
Not used to this. When this gets up to hearing, will we see Mako in as a proponent for this?
I am currently part of the leadership of Mako, so is Joe. We have been involved in this, and we are here to make it work.
I didn't hear a strong yes or no.
Well, yeah, no, we're committed. Our executive committee has already voted to support this, and but it's an ongoing communications back and forth to make sure it works for all the taxpayers.
Just a quick follow-up on that. And is it Mako who paid for the polling?
The question was it Mako that paid for the polling? I can answer that. No, it was not. The commissioners did not want to spend taxpayer money to that, so they turned to their private industry partners to help underwrite that polling.
I'd like to add a little bit to the Mako question, which was a very good question. We go through an elaborate process every year of creating both resolutions which call for specific bill things to happen and a more general policy statement of what we think statewide policy should look like. These gentlemen have totally 100% incorporated the Mako policy statement on what we need to see in a local option tax in order to support it. And that is no new money for county government or any government. The money has to go back in for tax relief. It has to be locally activated. So quite frankly, it's very much in our policy, which was passed by all the delegates to the annual conference, that we have to support this bill because this bill is exactly what the policy says that we wanted. So thank you, gentlemen, once again for paying attention to our needs.
I want to include, too, that in addition to Mako, we had at the table at every step of the way other large associations. We extended invites to participate in this conversation to the Montana Infrastructure Coalition, the Montana League of Cities and Towns, Chambers of Commerce, economic developers, et cetera. We wanted to get as many perspectives as possible. That's how we think that you craft good policies. You get a lot of folks, smart folks at the table, poking holes in your idea. And so the League of Cities and Towns, I'm unsure of their position on this, but I do know that much of this shift in the drafting occurred after conversations with a lot of our large cities who expressed the same goal. They didn't want new revenue. They wanted to go to property tax relief. So we're hopeful that as more people understand the details of this proposal, what it truly means, that it's not the same old local option that we've seen, that it's new and different and unique, that we're going to get more and more support.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll end this and appreciate you being here and participating. Thank you, all of you on Zoom. Appreciate your time today. So
thank you.
Let's move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.